Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is a beautiful day to talk about the Herons, and it's a great opportunity for us to move past what was, I think, a very boring game on Sunday to a more exciting topic, and that's what we're going to do today, talking all about the winter transfer window, the offseason that Inter Miami had, and now that we've gotten a chance to see what most of those players look like in person, I think we have some thoughts that will be interesting to discuss, and that's what this episode is going to be all about. As always, I'm your host, Scotty, but this time I brought on a special guest to have this conversation with me. So please, I want to thank Mike Longin from the Inter Miami Show for joining me for the next hour to talk about the Herons. It's a huge pleasure as always. And how are you feeling, man?
No, I'm excited to be here, and I know you're gonna probably kill me just going off. I'm really in a good mood because I'm just gonna plug these donuts I just had. I just had one of life-changing donuts from a place called Parlor Donuts somewhere in Fort Lauderdale. And if you're listening to the show, you're in Broward County, look this place up because life-changing. We could be 0-7 right now, and I'd still be in a good mood after eating these donuts. But luckily, we are very far from that. And how can you not be in a good mood for everything that's going on?
For a little behind the scenes, I have actually moved my second screen from the agenda for today to look up what these Parlor Donuts looked like. And now I have to go back. But that's basically what we've been talking about, along with one other little tidbit that you mentioned a couple minutes ago before we went live, that you thought last Wednesday's game was the second most exciting game in Inter Miami history for you. So I have to naturally ask, what did you think was the most exciting game, and where did that game rank in your sort of best 5 games ever, or best 3 games ever for Inter Miami?
So it's funny. We were discussing this. A bunch of people went to the Fort Lauderdale United game. That's the USL Women's Super League game on Saturday night. And this actually was like a conversation we were just chatting with about before a game, during game. So my number one game in Inter Miami history is the Dallas Leagues Cup match, the 4-4 draw that went to penalties, where Messi gets a free kick. They score an own goal header. Was one a beautiful header. It was back and forth. I think we were down 1.31 in the match, and we came back. That was the most exciting Inter Miami game. I think Wednesday night's game was the best effort game, the game that we had to kind of do everything on our own. We weren't gifted goals. Nobody, and I think you've been super vocal about this on Twitter, the referees did not help us at all. They haven't been helping us all season, as you've made some great points, but we really got no help from CONCACAF refs. And so we had to do all the work on ourselves. And, you know, when one of my favorite players, Noah Allen, scores a goal on just by putting a ball up there that should never have gone in. It was a great game, but I will say that Dallas game, I think, was the most exciting, crazy match Inter Miami's ever played. Like the most memorable, most memorable Leagues Cup final. So I guess I have 3 different matches for 3 different things. Leagues Cup finals, definitely most memorable, most exciting will be Dallas, but I think most complete effort and the one that really stands out would be this last one.
No, all excellent, incredibly fun games to be a fan. I've always said my favorite game of all time was that U.S. Open Cup semifinal, especially in the second half where they were down 2-0 at halftime and then fought back, and then 98th minute Messi to Campana. That has always been a special moment for me. But that Dallas game was incredible. You were right. They were down 3-1. And then Kramaski comes on and scores, and then they immediately give up an own goal the other way. I think it was Robert Taylor. So as soon as you get back into the game, you're back down 2 goals. It's 4-2. And then the hurried comeback in the last 10 minutes to make it a game, and then extra penalties. That was a really special moment as well. But I think this Wednesday night game is also belonging right in that same tier as an amazing game.
And I haven't posted this publicly. A couple people have heard the story. So I was at the game for the first half of this Wednesday night game. And then my son, unfortunately, didn't feel well. And so I had to leave at halftime. And I set a new speed record getting from, I'm going to call it Drive Pink Stadium, because it's always Drive Pink Stadium, back to my house. And I was my butt on the couch by the 62nd minute. I just missed the second goal, watched the rest of the game. Man, what a finish. What a finale. And congratulations to the boys, because they played hard. They dove deep. And I mean, Suarez might have bit Alba at some point during the match, but besides that, it was just a complete match.
He almost scored too, but questionable offsides on that one. Let's let's get into the main topic for the day, because I do think it is good to step back sometimes and look at things holistically and analyze where this team is from sort of a 10,000 foot view. And that's why I wanted you to come on and do that, because that game wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for Maxi Falcone with a stop at the goal line in the first leg. It wouldn't have been possible if we didn't get contributions from Fafa Picault, who's also had a game winner. Tadeo Allende returning for the second leg. All of these new players that Inter Miami has brought in over the winter transfer window to help transform this team into what they think and what could possibly be one that wins huge trophies. It's all made possible because of the work they did over the winter window. And so I wanted to talk about, now that I think it's probably finished for Inter Miami, and I think certainly we're done with incomings. For anyone wondering, the transfer window officially closes next week. Outgoings, I think Julian Gressel is probably the only player that's sort of up in the air, but he isn't really a part of this team anyways. So I don't really know if it affects this team that much. So for all intents and purposes, I think the transfer window is done for Inter Miami. Let me start by saying, do you agree with that?
I think you're right. I think we're going to hold out for the summer window. Obviously, there's two big names being attached to us for the summer window, so we got to hold on some bank. I think I can't not believe that Calendar and Taylor are still not being shopped around MLS in the league. So I think there's a couple names out there. I am really curious. You mentioned Gressel, so I just want to call this out. I 100% agree. Gressel has to be on the chopping block. Bogert keeps on kind of questioning, why is he not there? Why is he not there? Why is he not being played? If he's still on the roster come end of next week, I'm curious if we start seeing him be played a little bit, because kind of he's sitting there. Because it makes kind of, at least as I understand MLS roster rules, it makes no sense to just cut him and take the buyout at this point, because we don't need the space. So why waste the million, waste the money? So I am curious if we don't sell him, where, what happens. But there's so many teams in this league that can make use of Gressel. And now that you can just pay pure cash to go buy him, it just feels like this is eventually going to happen.
I do wonder if MLS would allow you to trade him and keep 50% of his salary and then use your buyout on that 50% of the salary. I wonder if that's something that the MLS would allow you to do. Obviously, this is a league that is willing to manipulate the rules as they see fit. If it's not clearly stated, you can do this or you can't do this. So I'm curious about that. But I agree with you. I think if he's not gone feels a rough word to say, but if he's not in a better spot for himself a week from today or in a week and a half from today, I think he should be reintegrated in some way, even if that means he's just on the bench consistently or he gets a 5-minute cameo. He's too good of a player to just not participate at all.
It's interesting. So my seats in Drive Pink, and I'm gonna keep on calling it Drive Pink. I'll never call it Chase Stadium.
This is the Drive Pink dialogue, man. That's what we get it.
My seats in Drive Pink are right along the path the players walk to start warmups, and he has yet to make that walk without looking dejected. Like, I keep on joking with my son. We need to make a sign for him that says, "Gressel, do you need a hug?" Like, he just looks so sad. So, and I think he's talked about on his own podcast that he's clearly not part of the plan. So I really, like, for his sake, I just really hope he does find a spot, because the talent's there, the skill is there, the ability's there, and the pedigree is there. He's done everything, I think, at this point in MLS. Like, somebody take a chance. I think the problem, one of the people on I'm sorry, I missed the quote, but one of the commenters has pointed out, like, he's on a very expensive $1 million contract. That's a lot for a team to take on.
Well, I don't want to get bogged down in Gressel, but I do think there's a lot of teams that would find Gressel to be a huge improvement and certainly worth a TAM level roster commitment, at least for this year. But of course, he has an extra year on top of that. And maybe that's the big point that no one wants to get to. Sean with the comment about his contract. Okay, let's rewind the clock 6 months to the end of that Atlanta game. A few days later, we find out Tata Martino won't continue with the club. We talked about it like 2 days before that happened, or 3 days before that happened, about how we thought that should happen. A little prescient on our part. They bring in Javier Mascherano, and the team with Raul Sanyehi and whoever else is in the front office gets to work on devising a plan for this off season. And I will recap quickly the players that went in and went out, just for everyone who may have forgotten. But On that roster, decision day, Cole Jensen, Felipe Valencia, Lawson Sunderland, Nico Freire, and Sergei Christoph get released. Matias Rojas as well. He's the one that I think was a little bit of a shock. Diego Gomez soon after goes to Brighton. Cedar Dos Santos traded to San Diego. Campana traded. Emerson Rodriguez and Facundo Farias also leaving in the winter window. And then the incomings were Fafa Bico, Tadeo Allende, Gonzalo Lujan, the re-signing of Oscar Scotty, Rocco Rios Novo, Talasco Segovia, Maxi Falcone, and most recently Alan Obando and Baltasar Rodriguez. This is a pretty big roster rehaul for a team that broke the points record last year, but I think in a lot of other ways failed to live up to their own expectations. They got a new coach, and I think they did have to find ways to support that coach and a new style that he wanted to bring. But there was also a new sporting director who was probably eager to put his own mark on the team. At that moment, what did you think this team really needed to do in the winter? Or did you feel like this team was pretty set to run it back with maybe a change here or there?
You know, I really had hoped, and I was very vocal being on the anti-Tata Martino crowd. So I really hoped just by changing a manager alone, we would see big changes. I've also not been on the crowd that we need to switch to fix the defense, that our attack is our problem. I think this winter window was probably about 80% of what I wanted. I'll call it the two things I'm still struggling a little with. Falcone, fantastic. Like, I think he is the anchor now to our back line. You called it out. Everyone forgets that his goal line stand. And if you watch it, what a perfect, he goes down to one knee, hands behind the back. I don't know, by the way, if anyone else here knows LMFAO, but I just call him LMFAO because he looks just like the guy from the band.
Oh, yeah.
I think that to me feels like our number one signing, because it did, even though I wasn't looking for a defensive signing, he anchored it. Noah Allen becoming the number 2 center back. I think if we roll back 18 months, nobody saw that coming. Even 12 months ago, people were demanding he be traded and sold. And now he's really starting left center back. I think everyone else is standing behind him. So I have never been much to give credit to Tata Martino. I have to give credit to Tata Martino and what he did for Noah Allen, because probably weren't anyone else on the team. He changed his career trajectory. Attacking, I was Fafa. I was wrong on. I criticized that move. I said the only way that makes sense if he came for basically free to come back to South Florida, which Inter Miami just did a whole South Florida video for him. He's so quick. I think he makes a big change of pace. But I still don't think we have an effective attack. I still don't think, and now we haven't seen much from the new striker. Fortunately, he kind of pulled a Campana the first chance he got, which Campana, I don't know if you've seen the video from this week. Campana pulled an even bigger Campana for New England. But I don't feel the attack is complete. And I don't necessarily have 100% the answer there. I think part of it is Suarez isn't clicking right now. He's missed so many sitters that if he had made those, I think maybe I'm making different comments, because a lot of these games look a lot different. But he's missed at least 4, if not 5 or 6 sitters that if my son missed, I would be saying you need to go start running laps. And I think that's my biggest question mark, is like, when is our attack going to click? I think this was our first 3-goal game on Wednesday night, and then we followed up with a 0-0 draw against barely a playoff team. So
we have hit 3 a couple times this year in the second leg against Sporting Kansas City, and we scored 4 at Houston. We will come back to the offense. I want to stick to the defense for a second, because I think you bring up some interesting points, and I want to dedicate some real time to it. But defensively, I think that was the concern last year, and it wasn't just the personnel at center back. It was, how did the midfield shape up? I think once Yannick Bright came into the midfield, it was a lot better. But can you move Sergio Busquets back to his natural role in the midfield? Remember, he was starting at center back virtually every game last year in the last couple months. Nico Freire injured. Sergei Christoph, I think, had run his course. And so not only did you have players with high salaries coming off the roster, but you also had an opportunity to improve on that. And you mentioned Noah Allen, but I agree. Maxi Falcone has been a tremendous signing. And all of a sudden you get a situation where your back 2 have a 3-man rotation of Maxi Falcone, Noah Allen, and Toto Aviles being the third person in that rotation. And you feel much better about your center back partnerships. And guys like David Martinez and Gonzalo Lujan are sort of depth pieces where we were used to be playing Christoph and Ryan Saylor and, Chris McVeigh, et cetera. So I do think they did a tremendous job of finding the right pieces, which is not something they had done over the previous couple windows. Nico Freire didn't really seem like that guy. David Martinez, I think, has been a little bit of a disappointment based on what they thought he was going to be coming in. So I think that was an excellent signing. The midfield, the transition from a 3-man midfield to a 2-man midfield, I also think was an interesting decision, because with Diego Gomez leaving and you don't bring back Lawson Sunderland, you're thinking about shunting Benjamin Kramaski to the wide midfield position. David Ruiz, I think, is probably going to play a lot in a similar role. It did feel like there was a chance this team was going to be a little light on impact midfielders, especially if Telasco Segovia wasn't going to be one of them. How did you feel about this team shaping up in the midfield, where we're playing a 2-man midfield, and yet a lot of the guys we've been counting on there have sort of been moved to different positions?
We have so much depth at midfield that it's interesting, because you mentioned Kramaski, and I really struggle to see Kramaski on the field. I'll start with that one. I think looking at him, looking at his body type, he has to have put on 20 pounds of muscle since we first saw him 2-3 years ago. And I feel like he's lost this. What made the difference was his engine and his speed, right? He was such a competitor, so fast, and it made up for the fact that he had a lousy first touch and some other issues. As he's bulked up, he hasn't put on that speed. I mean, he's lost the speed as he's bulked up, and I just don't feel he's the same midfielder that we had a few years ago that was, capped by U.S. men's national team. There was talk about going to Argentina. And I think I'm thankful that like a guy like Segovia's here, Allende's here, because we needed that. I don't think we realized how much we really needed true midfielders. And Matias Rojas, him leaving was, as you mentioned at the start, a surprise. Like, we expected him to stay. So the churn there, I think, was really surprising. I think I wasn't expecting so much churn. And then all of a sudden I realized how much we needed it. I am concerned because it feels like Allende and Segovia haven't kind of started strong, but it doesn't feel like they're clicking all of a sudden. It seems like whatever Allende's injury is, it's either persisting or it's just not clicking like it used to.
Yeah. Well, he just came back from injury, right? He's played 2 games now, and one was 30 minutes off the bench. The big change then, I guess, is the formation under Javier Mascherano, right? Tata Martino played a couple different styles, but almost all of them were very centric on Messi being a right winger, coming in and doing the things that Messi loves to do. And for Javier Mascherano to say, I want him as my number 10 to be my focal point, my centerpiece, that was going to require drastic changes for a lot of people's roles. You mentioned Kramaski, that box-to-box 8 role doesn't really exist in this system. And so he's had to find other ways to try and make an impact. And so what did he need for this new formation? I think it was a lot of different style of wingers to be able to mix and match to make this offense work on a game-to-game basis. This is just my theory, and feel free to jump in if you disagree. But I really don't think there's a systemic problem with the offense. It's that he has a bunch of tools at his disposal, and that's Javier Mascherano I'm talking about. And as long as he plays the right one for the right situation, he ends up having great success. Almost all of our wingers are different types of wingers. And so if you don't get the right ones in the right situation, you end up with a little bit of a stagnant offense, which I think we saw specifically on Sunday.
I want to challenge you with your own words. And that is, you went out last week, I think, and you posted something I 100% agreed with, which is this is the best roster ever in MLS history. There's never been a roster as stacked as what Inter Miami built. Not just on the top end with the Barca 4, but on the low end with the academy products. And yet you look at our last 2 regular season games, a 0-0 draw against Chicago and a 1-1 draw against Toronto. And I get that we're in rotational play. We obviously care more about CCC, but we're still playing a lot of our starters. And I do feel like something's missing, because if you're going to keep on playing the starters, like with the people they're supposed to be comfortable with, and I kind of pick on Suarez more than anyone else, they do seem off. It doesn't seem like they're playing well together. It doesn't seem like they're clicking. And I don't think it's a formational thing, and I don't think it's a comfort thing, because saying Lionel Messi and Suarez aren't on the same page is it's incorrect. But it just doesn't seem like it's working. And so I feel like something's wrong. I know one of your I apologize again. There it is. Ash per Teams just said once the starting 11 gets on the same page, the team's performance will vastly improve. I agree with that statement, except for the fact that some of these guys should already be on the same page. And I don't know if I'm a big Mascherano fan. I think he's doing great things. The thing I don't think he's doing enough is his rotation. And I think our players are a lot more tired than the team's letting on. And I'm kind of saying this on the fly, I do start to think that once we get out of CCC and into a regular rotation with some rest, maybe that's when the offense will click. Maybe it isn't even just another player. It's just getting these guys the rest they clearly need. I'm curious, with a full week's rest for this week, what changes?
I want to frame this in a conversation about what the team did in the offseason, but I think the team and the club did a good job of bringing in a variety of different attackers into this roster. We haven't seen much of Alan Obando. We haven't seen much of Baltasar Rodriguez, but I do think Telasco Segovia, Robert Taylor, Fafa Picault, Tadeo Allende are pretty different style of wingers. They have different levels of athleticism, technicality on the ball, verticality, physicality, etc. And I think they did that because they understood that different games were going to require different pieces. And I don't think Javier Mascherano has adapted the same mindset to this point. And so when you're saying something like, when the starters all click together, they'll be fine, I'm sort of thinking you shouldn't have a set starter on the right wing and on the left wing, because different games are going to require different pieces to attack different defenses in different ways. And I think that's been the biggest problem. And I will, but at the risk of getting too off topic, even going back to Sunday, if you wanted to press a team high like they tried to do, Telasco Segovia is not that player. That's why I think a guy like Fafa Picault would have been much more effective in that situation. Benjamin Kramaski and Tadeo Allende on either side, or even a Robert Taylor type player.
But where do you say? I get the point, right? Like horses for courses. You got to have the right players at the right time. But we tied Toronto, right? And like this team with this roster against the majority of MLS is heads and tails above them. I get LAFC. I think this Columbus Crew matchup is a super interesting matchup. And to sound a little bit of a homer, like we should be rolling through these games a little bit easier than we are.
I agree.
And so again, you're right. You have to adjust for different teams, but sometimes you just roll in and you're the better team and you don't care what they throw at you. You just kind of stick with what you work because you know it's going to eventually wear them down and beat them. And one of the things we used to say about Tata Martino is he overthought the game. Right, he's like, I'm going to do a three-man back line here or two-man. Like he overthought it, and it was constantly changing, so the team never got comfortable on a regular basis, and there was always change. And it shouldn't be that we're reacting to what they're going to throw at us. It should be that they're reacting to just Inter Miami's coming into town, and Inter Miami's going to steamroll you, and they know what they're going to do. Except for, again, 4 or 5 teams in this league where you actually have to kind of take it a little more seriously. Plus Atlanta, because Atlanta. That's why I think you should really have your core starters, and except for very specific situations. I think my other concern is we don't really have a great backup for some of these new pieces. Like Fafa. Fafa brings so much speed to the wing. Who's our other really speedy guy? Fafa goes down, but we want the speedy guy. Is it
Tadeo Allende?
I was going to say Allende. It's I can't think of the young guy. The young guy we
Leo
got last year in the draft. Fonzo. It's probably Fonzo.
Guys.
Like, I just hope we have enough of that, because that was like the things we were missing last year is the true backup for the people we needed. And you mentioned defensively, It's so weird. You mentioned defensively early. Alvarez as a backup as a number 3 defender, and I will just never be comfortable with Alvarez ever on the pitch at this point, because I just feel like he's a walking red card. Like, I don't know. That's my concern here. Is we are the best team in the league, and Sean Callahan just called outside of big names on Miami 2012. LA roster is a great MLS roster. Agreed. That was another great roster, but like every team should be reacting to us. I don't think we should be overthinking some of what we're doing. And this is where the one kind of concern with Mascherano's completely empty resume of managerial experience, except for the youth Argentina team. That's where you sometimes kind of wonder, does he have the experience he needs to just know what? My guys are better. We're going to win. Let them deal with us.
I listen, I don't think we're saying different things here. I just think that we can go game to game and say they should have done this better, they should have done that better, or they did this phenomenally, and that's why they won 4-1. I just think that this roster has put together something of tremendous depth and quality. I think we agree on that. And so the fact that we have guys that are getting exhausted because we're not rotating, and it feels sometimes like we're not putting the right pieces in the right moments, that to me is frustrating. But it's also not really where I want to go with this conversation. Let's bring it back to what the team was able to do in the winter window, because that is supposed to be the theme of this episode.
I keep on
Javier Mascherano. No, it's okay. It's okay. Javier, it wouldn't let you if it wasn't interesting, if you weren't going interesting places. Javier Mascherano came in and he had an idea of what he wanted to do, right? You mentioned his lack of club experience, and as far as I can tell, as far as I'm concerned, it was basically zero coaching experience, and certainly at the club level. So he had an idea of what he wanted. He obviously understands the game of soccer very well. He knew, I want Messi as my 10. I have to figure out a bunch of other things around it, but that's where I want to start. Do you think the club did a good job of prepping this roster for what he wanted to be, especially as a transition from what we had last year?
I think they did, and what I want to call it here is Allende and Fafa, because one of the challenges the team really, really had last year was everything went through Messi, right? Like the team was constantly passing back to Messi. And where I think Robert Taylor initially excelled was he wasn't scared to be the guy in the field that just goes for it. And that was really successful for him. And then that kind of petered off, and then he became another guy that played through Messi. I think Fafa will do what he thinks is best, including when it's called for playing through Messi. And I think Allende is the same time. So I think you have a number of players who are going to play their game as part of the larger Inter Miami game, versus in the past, especially towards the end of last year, where the entire team just wanted to play Messi's game. And Messi's the greatest of all time. I'm not trying to take anything away from Messi, but what you see is most defenses are figuring out clutter the center of the pitch where Messi's kind of sitting, put 4 or 5 bodies in front of him, and all of a sudden you bottle up our attack. And it's only when you put a guy like Fafa or Allende who's going to attack down the side, make the play, that we kind of open it back up. And that's when you can start opening Messi up again. But you have to, as a player, be willing to say, I see Messi's open, but I'm going to take it forward myself. And not a lot of players seem to have that. I don't know if I want to call it maturity or machismo. I'm going to butcher my Spanish there, to do that. And some of those players he brought in, though, clearly are willing to do that at the risk of a Suarez, tongue lashing, because it does do a lot for our attack.
Yeah, no doubt. They brought in guys that have confidence. And I do
That's
wonder
what I was looking for.
I do wonder if there is a sense that the longer you are with this team and the more times you get chewed out by a certain player here or there, you sort of express yourself a little bit less. I wonder if that is part of how this goes. And so maybe that's why we've seen guys like Allende and Fafa come in with their, trying to establish themselves. We haven't really seen it been reined back in. I will mention Ian Frey is a guy that feels like he's reined in his own game over the last couple of weeks to his own detriment. It's neither here nor there.
Depth-wise, I think it's worth taking a couple seconds on. We have, and the comments you're seeing in a number of comments, that Suarez and Messi will light into players that don't give them the ball. And the reality is, on the soccer field, I teach my 12-year-old the same thing. Like, sometimes the right play is to pass and sometimes the right play is to shoot. And you have to be willing to make that choice. You can't always force yourself into the pass. And I just think that's the fear I have for Mascherano, because Mascherano has to look at Messi and Suarez in the eye, guys that 5 years ago he was playing with, and say, no, man, you're wrong. It's right he took the shot. I hope that's happening behind the scenes, because Robert Taylor specifically does not look like the same Robert Taylor from a few years ago. He's completely plays timid. He's forces the pass. And you've seen that with other players, and you mentioned Frey as well. Like, these guys don't seem to be who they used to be. Ironically, the Noah Allen goal was coming from someone who you'd think would be kind of more scared, and for some reason, I think that was supposed to be a pass, to be fair, but he put the ball. He didn't kind of force the pass into Messi. He kind of went over the top, which was, essentially the game tying goal.
Yeah. Again, I think
I'm taking you off topic again.
No, it's
this
okay.
is what you get with me. Everyone that's from my show here, they know I'm not going to stick with your script. I am going to go in my own direction. You're lucky I'm not still talking about donuts.
No. It is great practice for me to bring it back and try and transition us. No, I agree with you. I think that there is something about this team, and especially when it's so focused on Messi, and particularly when games aren't going their way, they become more afraid, and they work towards pushing the ball centrally to Messi, because he does want to take the game on his shoulders, and he does have the talent to make it happen when he does that frequently. So I understand the psychology of all of it. It's hard for me to criticize anyone, and so that's not really what I'm going to do, because I do think from everyone's different perspective and vantage point, it makes sense in a certain way. That said,
but to answer your question, I do think we have brought in the players. I'm going to go back to your question. I do think we brought in the players that Mascherano was looking for to balance the attack, and I don't think we're done yet. Right? Like, the rumors are too what we're seeing today will not be the team we finish the season with. There's more coming, and I don't know how much that plays in to what we're missing still. I mean, we've all seen the rumors. They're going hot and heavy. I think there's another big signing coming in. I don't know if we're gonna. So Sean Callahan just wrote, hopefully we get a Mike rant. I don't know if we're gonna get a rant. I need Branson here to rant against, but I don't think we're complete yet. Like, I think we brought in a lot of players he's looking for, but I have the feeling it's like almost all the way there, and there's going to be something's going to come in, and just in the summer, that's when it's going to be like, wow, just wow. And I'm not saying this from any insider knowledge besides the same rumors that I'm seeing all over, and hearing it from other places as well. Like, there's fire to something of this smoke.
Let's sit on that idea for a second, because I think that's interesting. The smoke, the rumors, Di Maria, Kevin De Bruyne, Neymar, Pogba, whatever, like, those aren't happening until the summer, no matter what. So let's put a pause on that idea for just a second. Do you think this team didn't do a good enough job of building a complete roster in the meantime? Because I look at the depth, and I say they have multiple guys who can play a real legitimate right back. They have the best center back depth they've had in years. Left back, you feel good, although maybe that's the one spot I might want an 18-year-old that can play a little bit, because Noah Allen can no longer just be the backup, because he's earned himself a starting role. The midfield feels like it has plenty of guys, and there's so many wingers that you feel there's always quality to put out there, that guys like Santi Morales and Leo Alfonso and even Julian Gressel and Robert Taylor are struggling to find minutes. You might want another striker, but as we've seen, you're probably not going to see the other striker anyways. You might want to back up left back, because Noah Allen is now a starting center back. I don't know if it's ideal to not have an extra left back, but aside from that, it does feel like they've completed the roster, and whatever they do in the summer might just be, let's take it another step further. Or do you think there's still holes?
So I want to back you up one thing, because you said, we don't need our striker because we've got our number 9. Our number 9 isn't scoring.
I agree.
And if it was anyone but Suarez, he would have been sat for a game for resting purposes and give someone else a chance. And so I think the lack of a true back. Now, I know we just brought the new guy in. I can't think of his name right now.
Obando.
But until we see what he can actually do, like if you scrolled way up, someone said we need a proven MLS striker. I agree with that statement. Like, it would be good to have a proven veteran MLS striker on the bench that we can plug in the 70th minute when Suarez is tiring, or can start for Suarez, when between, on a game like this past weekend, because we don't have that. And I do think teams know that. And what it allows teams to do is, because they're not scared, they're not necessarily as scared, because Suarez is not the fastest guy in the world. You do not need a speedy center back to keep up with him. It allows them to put more pressure on Messi, which kind of causes all the issues. So having a change of pace striker, I think, would be huge. And so I think that's the one thing. That is one thing we didn't pick up.
Are you
I know you just showed it.
Are you suggesting that this club didn't adequately replace Leo Campana in the offseason? Are you saying that Leo Campana played a vital role to this team that helped this team achieve everything that it did last year by providing that depth piece and a certain amount of quality where you can say, Luis, take 60 minutes off because we feel good about the guy we're putting on? Are you a Leo Campana advocate in this moment?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Campana did score a few game winners during those games that
I love Campana.
I'm sad for Campana because I wanted him to be successful in New England. The thing with Campana was he may not score, but teams were scared enough of him that if you brought him in there, they had to react to him. And we just don't a tired Suarez that they're not scared of. They're not. Like, it's not the same attack. It's not the same Suarez that he was 3 bites ago, right? Like, he just isn't Suarez. And I'm not saying we should be, I'm seeing if I can get you without comment. I'm not saying we should bench Suarez because I really don't want to have my house firebombed. But I just wish we had a really strong backup that we had faith in, that was a veteran backup, that when the time came for Suarez to take a rest, we could plug someone else in, because that's a piece I really feel like we're missing.
Just for the record, Luis Suarez this season, a goal and an assist in that second leg against Sporting Kansas City, 3 assists and a goal the following game against Houston, a goal against Cavalier, an assist against Charlotte, a penalty against Cavalier. He started the season fine. It has been a downturn over the last 7-8 games, and I don't think that's a secret or anything that we need to hide or pretend isn't happening. And so that's why you want to see him get a rest and say, listen, see the game for 60 minutes from the sideline, get a different vantage point, get a mental reset. It's not because he's an awful player. It's because he's in a little bit of a rut, and that happens to everyone.
I don't want to have my house firebombed. I am not recommending we bench Luis Suarez, but I do think there's having someone that, like you said, lets him have a rest. It's interesting. So I mentioned earlier where I sit right above where the Barca 4 have their suites. And I have had Messi sit below me. I've had Alba sit below me. And just this past week, I had Busquets sit below me. In 2 years, I've never had Suarez sit below me. He never takes a rest. He's always there. And that's a good thing, right? Everyone comments about the knees, but he actually never is so injured he can't play. But it still would be good if he could take a rest. And right now, he can't take a rest.
You. No, I agree with you. I am curious to see what Alan Obando is, because I don't think it's fair to make a judgment on him yet. I think if you look hard, you can find some really nice moments from his debut. Obviously, the miss opportunity was the big highlight moment, but it's not fair to judge an 18-year-old on 20 minutes. I'm curious to see what he has, and I think that will be sort of something we learn over the next couple of weeks and months. Do you think the club feels that they didn't do an adequate job of finding a backup striker or someone that can replace Campana's role?
I think the club is happy with it, and I'll base it on like a truth that I'm interpreting, which is if they weren't happy, you drop Gressel and you go find someone else and you make the move. And the fact that you have this asset that you just have to take a financial hit on, or give up your one of your two not buyouts. You could buy out Gressel tomorrow and make a move, and they've never done that. So I think the club is happy with the moves they've made. I don't think that they have major concerns. To your point, almost every position has depth. Even bringing up our goalkeeper, Ustari is now the starter. Drake Calendar is your backup. Everyone was questioning, okay, you sold Dos Santos, you sold Cole. Like, what were you doing? What are you thinking? But turns out like you got a starter and you got a backup. So I think the club feels we're in a pretty good shape. And the fact is, when my biggest concern is striker. I know someone previously mentioned CDM. Come on, we're starting Bright. Behind him's Redondo. You've always got Busquets. So we've got 3 CDMs. We're stacked all across the board. The club can't be that unhappy with where we are right now.
I'm with you. I think that they feel like Obando is good enough and ready to be the guy that can replace Suarez when Suarez needs to be rested. I do wonder if there's a little bit of a disconnect between how the front office feels the striker situation should play itself out versus how Mascherano and Luis Suarez think the striker situation should play itself out. Luis Suarez is the only player that has started every single game this season for Inter Miami. Not a coincidence. And so I wonder if there's a disconnect there. But I do think the team has put the tools in front of Mascherano and on this roster to give another guy an opportunity. And by the way, like I think Tadeo Allende could be a fine striker. I think Fafa Bico can do a job there. So it's not just that it has to be Alan Obando. I think it's more about Luis Suarez wanting to and being given
but I think huge
to your point there.
To your point, by the way, Sean Callahan is killing it in the comments section. You need to be throwing some more of these comments up. But Allende and Fafa, when you put them in the striker role, the game changes, right? They play very differently than Suarez. And this is where I kind of go back to, if you're constantly changing the game, it's really hard for the players. And I'm going to make a comparison that you're going to tell me is so I'm going to get ripped for this one. But so my son's team plays both 9v9 and 11v11. He's U12 and they do both. And every single game they've ever played, they played a 4-man backline. And this week, and it's the only time I've ever gotten mad at the coach, this past Saturday, his left back couldn't be there, so he went to a 3-man backline. And all of a sudden, no player on the field seemed to know how to play soccer anymore. They got blown out. It was embarrassing. And the problem is, and I know at the professional level, you're supposed to be able to more adjust. Like, sub's supposed to be able to run there and say, hey, now we're running a 4-man backline. We were 3, and it's supposed to be easy. But it's not always that easy. And when the guy's changing, the field's changing, the position's changing, that requires accommodation. And so I do get worried that we just don't have like-for-like subs in a lot of these positions. So I agree with you. I do think the club is looking at this favorably. I, as a fan specifically who's always, as far back as the first time you and I talked, have had issues with our attack, I do have concerns that some things just aren't there yet. But that being said, Suarez goes off for 3 goals this weekend or 2 goals and assist, I'm going to look pretty stupid.
I don't think you are, because your point is not that Suarez is untalented or isn't capable of doing that type of performance. It's just that he's not been there consistently this year like we've needed him to. And it's particularly glaring because it's the first time we've seen this from him. And it's also the first time that Inter Miami has had sort of a rut when they're supposed to be dominating everyone. I do think people of late are being a little more critical on the offense than has been deserved over the course of the season, because I do think they started pretty well, aside from that one game where they were in the freezing cold and it was hard to kick the soccer ball. I thought their first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, I thought the offense was doing what they needed to do, averaging over 2 goals a game, etc. Baltasar Rodriguez, do you think that his impact, well, A, what do you expect from Baltasar? And B, do you think his impact is going to drastically change what this team is?
I have no idea. It's a really great question. And I don't know what we're going to see from him yet. And the problem is, if I'm being completely honest, every time we predict what one of these players is going to bring based on where they were before they got into this crazy team, we tend to be wrong. I think, Falcone seems to be one of the few players we kind of called right early on. I think some people called Fafa, but I think as kind of the same comment you just made about Armando, you can't judge him in 20 minutes until you get in there. Like, it's so speculative at this point.
I have a statement that I mapped out in my head that I want to drop on this in this podcast, and I want to get your thoughts on it. But I'm just going to read you a list of names, and you tell me if any of this reads out to you in any specific way, but Julian Carranza, Matias Pellegrini, Nico Figal, Franco Negri, Facundo Farias, Toto Avilas, Federico Redondo, Cello Wiegand, David Martinez, Gonzalo Lujan, Rocco Rios Nova to a smaller extent, and Baltasar Rodriguez. That's the list of every player we've brought over from Argentina, from the Argentine Professional League. And it feels like almost all of them have been a disappointment compared to their expectations. And I want to sit on that for a second because I do think people are hoping Baltasar Rodriguez will come in and radically transform our offense and he'll be this creative playmaker opposite Messi. And I think everyone needs to slow the row on that one because it is going to be hard for him to be that guy.
Man, I got to give you the feedback that when you're going to put a list up like that, like you got to flash it on the screen so I can read because I lost about half those names. I do agree, though, that our South American acquisitions have been very hit or miss. For a long, I'm on certain chats where everyone picks on every pick Chris Henderson made and all these bad picks, but you're right. Like it does seem to be kind of consistent. Then again, Negri is now the starting left back for
San
Diego, who's doing very well. So I think some of this is also situational. I think this club, to a large degree, for the majority of the seasons, have also had a lot of dictation done by certain players on the squad. And I would almost argue there's only been one manager who's actually managed the team external to player influences. And so I think somewhat of that has had a major impact as well, where players are dictating what happens and all of a sudden people are on the outside that maybe don't necessarily deserve to be on the outside. So by the way, I just want to call out, you're talking about our attack. We are actually 10th in goals for. So I think it's hard to make an argument that we're scoring a lot of goals right now.
I'm saying we started well. And I genuinely think most of it has to do with playing the same guys over and over. And we talked about Suarez. I think Segovia's been run into the ground a little bit as well. And we've also played one less game than everyone else, and we're coming off a zero score.
That is a fair point.
But I'm not saying they've been great recently. Overall, if you had to put a grade on it, well, hold on. Let me ask you one more question. Do you think this team is more prepared to win trophies than it was last year? Tournament 100%, trophies.
100%.
And why?
I came into last year, I was on record as saying we were going to win no trophies. I didn't think we had the ability to win any tournaments, which I was right. I was proven right on, no matter how many people threatened my life. And the only trophy we won was the MLS one, Sports Shield, which no one expected. This team has the ability to win trophies. They have the ability for depth. The reality is, I mean, besides Leagues Cup, which was a magical run, and I think it was your comment that you're scared of Vancouver because it seems like Vancouver's on that same magical run we were in Leagues Cup. No Messi. This is the first time a Messi-led team has gotten past the quarterfinals. Like everyone brings up USAC 2 years ago. Messi wasn't on the team that got us into the semifinals. He was on the semifinal team, but now he's on the quarterfinal team. So this team seems much more prepared to go play in the big games.
Okay, but why? What is different about this team? Let's sit in that.
I think you start out with depth, which is because you have players you can rotate that we struggled with in the previous time. I think the second is I think it was either you posted it today or Battered Herons posted that last year we only had 3 clean sheets, and this year we've already had 5. So we have the ability
but that's true.
I think it was Battered Herons then. Battered Herons posted that this morning that we now, and again, I was never big on. I never thought defense was our issue. I thought it was our inability to attack. But now we all of a sudden have a defense that can hold the line, and you've seen time and again our defense standing up, and Falcon hugely part of it. Noah Allen, he was on the best starting 11. He was on the best starting 11 with Messi. 2 years ago, this kid was 3 years ago, this kid was playing in Weston in a travel team, and now he's in the best starting 11 with Messi. Like it's working, it's clicking. We couldn't do that last year. None of us had trust that teams couldn't score on us. We just had a hope we could score more goals. Now we can go win games 1-0 and hold the 0. We can hold a team to 1 goal like we did in LAFC. And we have kind of I think we kind of finally have the team culture that's supporting each other. And you've seen that in the interviews and the conversations. Suarez yells at everybody. We talked about that earlier, but you don't see the infighting amongst the team that you kind of saw last year. They seem to be much more on the same page.
Yeah, just to reword what you said, because I think you hit on the 2 major points for me. Tournament play is different than season play because any single moment can really ruin you. And so, having a stronger defense, and I guess over the course of the season, we'll find out just how strong, I think makes a huge difference. We saw them give up a goal against LAFC on the road. We saw them give up a goal at home, but we also saw the defensive players make some real huge plays that kept us in the game. And we've already talked about Maxi Falcone on the goal line. I thought in the second leg, there was some really nice moments from both Falcone and Noah Allen. So the defense, I think, is much improved. And then the depth last year against Monterrey, something that very few people mention because it didn't necessarily feel relevant at the time, but we actually had a huge injury problem as that series was kicking off. Messi didn't even play in the first leg. So I think those are the 2 biggest keys of why this team is better prepared. If someone does go down, which we just saw with Tadeo Allende in the first leg of the LAFC tie, you have someone that can step up. And if you have a solid defense, then your offense doesn't have quite the same responsibility, and it's less unpredictable. It's more predictable on a game-to-game basis.
I'll throw one out there too. You have to be a sports fan or what's it? Lady Luck seems to be a little bit more on our side this season. And what I'm saying is you're seeing, I think the Toronto game is a great example. Like Toronto should have beat us, except they kept on finding the post. LAFC, all of a sudden, handball, like a stupid handball changes the whole game. And so I just think there is a little bit of and by the way, Lady Luck sometimes is just the belief you're going to win is you have more belief than anyone else. But it just feels like where last year things weirdly would not go right for us. Injuries, balls would hit post, like Campana would just be Campana. Like this year, it feels a little bit more like we have the ability to do this. The belief is there, and at least one of the gods is on our side.
I hear what you're saying. I will say all of that sounds a little esoteric. And so if you don't end up winning, none of that actually was true. And if you end up winning, it all is true. So I'm a little hesitant to endorse it, but we'll end up seeing.
You talk to any major sports player and they'll tell you it's better to be lucky than good.
That's true. I'm sure that's true. Okay, let's end on a fun note because my final takeaway from this offseason is that they got an improvement at the coaching position, even though he does, I think, have a little bit of naivete to his game or to his coaching style. He is a better tactician and is better at in-game decision-making. I think they upgraded the defense in a significant way. I think they brought in some unique pieces on the offense that, if not replacing the players they have, adds a different dimension, right? Diego Gomez and Matias Rojas and Campana were 3 big offensive pieces that they had to sort of replace last season. I think they've done a good job of building this roster out to win trophies and achieve the goals that they want to achieve. But as we hinted at earlier, it might not really be complete. It might not hit its maximum level in the next week before the window closes because there are some big fish out there coming in the summer. What are your thoughts on what the team might be looking to do this summer?
So
early, I know.
Can I
let's have fun.
Backtrack a little bit because we didn't talk a bunch. Mascherano is such a great upgrade over Tata. His in-game management is just so much better.
I agree.
For the last year, we'd be sitting there and going, "Why are we not making subs at the 70th? Why not making subs 68th? Like we know we need those subs." And Mascherano can do that, and so The single biggest change I do really think is management, and our manager is different. We have a manager that can win. I cannot undersell enough how much I disliked Tata and thought he was caught hurting us. And now I think we finally have a manager that can win with us. But now to answer your real question, I think we have another big name coming, at least one. I think everyone's talking about that we're going to pull a Gareth Bale and sign him to initial TAM with a promise of a future DP contract and kind of skirt the rules. I want to remind everyone that last year Alba was a TAM player. I don't think he's making much more than he was last year. So that means there's probably buy down room to open up a DP slot. So I think there's a lot of room for big names to come in. The KDB rumor seems very leggy. Hearing it from people I know that this really does have fire. We know the Di Maria rumor is very leggy. Pogba has been at least 3 home games, I believe. Watching the game, that's you don't come sitting there watching and sitting in the box unless there's a reason. So I do think we expect to see some big names. I also wouldn't be surprised that, as the season plays out, we might have to make some changes due to injuries. The Lady Luck has protected our players for the most part this season, which is, as you point out, against Monterrey, we had an injured Messi. He most of the season we were playing with injured players. We had to use our buyout in like our player injury due to preseason matches. I think we got through the preseason with no injuries. Ian Frey has been injured and is still playing, which that's a miracle. So, there's room. I think there's going to be other changes we just don't expect, though, because of that. But so far, we're holding out.
I'm not so sure about that because I do think this team is really complete. I think maybe another striker, depending on what Alan Obando is. I actually think there might be room for a left back, but injuries are going to be so much easier for this team to overcome than virtually anybody else in the MLS because they've built a level of depth that even if you're not comfortable with a guy like Dotavilas, I think the club and the team should be very comfortable with as a sort of emergency replacement or a rotational piece or whatever. And so to me, it's all about, can you upgrade what you have now instead of filling in holes, which I don't think they've really presented themselves with. And we've talked about where they might have a hole. So if you're talking about KDB, you're talking about Neymar, you're talking about Di Maria, that's talking about upgrading, right?
Well, it's not just upgrading, though. The other piece to include is how do you fill the stadium post-Messi? And so I see the KDB rumors having a lot of traction because I see him coming in on a 3-year contract. And all of a sudden, when Messi leaves, you still have KDB. And so you have to include the business aspect of these major players, not just that they are upgrading positions, which 100% they will, but we have a brand new stadium. We have not opened up sales yet at the normal price points. Everything's been premium. And so you've got to find ways to sell tickets. And Sean Callahan asking, but does KDB sell Miami? KDB helps ensure you have a winning team. And KDB, I think most people believe KDB is going to be very successful in MLS. He's built to play in MLS. So I think he does help ensure a winning team post-Messi. Yeah, he's not the South American poster child. But remember, there's only one Messi, right? There's only one player who's going to fill stands like Messi does. So after that, whoever you bring in, people are going to have to either come from multiple games, which is not very many. I don't think Neymar does it. And I don't think Ronaldo's ever leaving Saudi Arabia. So you got to find players who can win. And getting KDB on a 3-year deal, I think gets that, or at least becomes a core for the future of this team.
I didn't really want to go down a diatribe, but I'm happy to go down with you now that we're here.
I don't think that was a rant, though. That didn't feel
No, it's okay. It's not a rant. It's a diatribe. It's totally different. It's semantics, I don't necessarily agree with you on this KDB thing because you now have Messi reportedly in talks to sign throughout 2026. You don't know what the schedule is going to look like beyond that. And I think there's going to be other guys of the quality of a KDB coming through next summer, the summer after, etc., that Inter Miami is going to be able to lure to this club. And so if you're talking about winning, Inter Miami, I think, will be fine. If you're talking about selling tickets, I don't think KDB does that in the same way that Messi does. And
no one does. I think that's the
right,
point. No
exactly.
one sells tickets the same way Messi does.
Okay, but you could say a Neymar or a Ronaldo is like in the same sort of tier, right?
But besides,
KDB is not close to that.
I agree on that standpoint. But besides Ronaldo, I don't even think Neymar. Like in Miami, who else could just be brought in just to sell tickets on name alone? I don't think this person exists in the football
I think
world.
Neymar does, honestly. And let me be clear on that. I don't think it's like Messi, but like people know who Neymar is that don't follow soccer. I don't think people that don't follow soccer really know who Kevin De Bruyne is, unless Inter Miami goes out there and really advertises and builds his name recognition.
I think KDB is more about building a winning team than building a name image. And
so then let me counter that. Let me counter that. What if he doesn't fit with Messi in this roster? We see right now in MLS, there's plenty of guys that are talented players coming over from Europe that don't quite fit their roster, and they become a huge anchor on the team, not a boost. And you end up having less of a winning team than you do before. And that makes me nervous. And so if you're talking about KDB coming in to be the centerpiece and you're going to build the team around his style, yeah, you can sell me on that. But if you have Messi for the next year and a half, potentially 2.5 years or however long, and KDB has to figure out how to fit into that, not just Messi, but also Suarez, also Busquets, also Alba, etc., and it doesn't work, he becomes an albatross, and that's a disaster for not just KDB, but the MLS and for Inter Miami.
So this is me speaking, and I always want to clarify that I know nothing. I absolutely think Messi plays in 2026 for Inter Miami because you need him to sell Inter Miami stadium MFP. Doesn't mean he's playing every game. And we've already seen Messi struggle to play a lot of games. He's already this season been out multiple games. And so I see 2026 as two things. I see it sold as the the Lionel Messi retirement parade. So every single ticket now just tripled in price. I also see it as the transition year from a South American-based club to a more European-looking club. I think we get away from being forced into South American talent. I think we go more Euro style. And that's where I think it becomes more about winning and not just about selling to a certain demographic in the area.
Okay, fair. Let's bring it back to 2025, because if you bring him in, he's the big move, right? And if whoever it is, if it's Di Maria or Neymar or whoever, that's the big move. Everything else will be sort of ancillary, whether they try and upgrade a goalkeeper, whether they try and bring in another striker, a backup left back, or another defensive midfielder or whatever, right? You're going to get one shot at the big move. So if it's KDB in 2025, how do you even think that works for this team?
I think this is where I go by the summer. There's going to be enough injuries and changes and moves that you try to make it work. I think I will agree with you. I want to agree to 2 points that you made because I think they're really great points. Well, one point you made and one point in the comments. Messi and KDB have never played together as far as I know. There is obviously major concerns how they do play together. Do I think they can make it work? Yes. This is KDB's played with some of the greats in Man City. He's constantly been surrounded by big names that are bigger than him. He knows how to make that kind of stuff work. Sean and someone else, Sean Callahan, and I believe it's Carlos going back and forth, that NYCFC is the better fit for KDB. There's a good point to that, right? You stay in the Man City group. They help open the New York Stadium. But I also think Inter Miami's been built not just as a club, but as a brand. And I think when you're doing it in that point of view, you can also make long-term investments. And so KDB not being a huge part of the 2025 team, but being on the roster to start building around in 2026, getting that signature done because it only costs money and we seem to have money to spare. And as you mentioned earlier, we can make up rules as we want. like, I don't think you're bringing KDB in for 2025 as much as you're bringing him in long term, and for now we'll make it work.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I guess my final point on this is that concerns me about this whole scenario is because I do think the only way it makes sense is if you make him the next guy, right? Like you don't bring him in like you do with Busquets and Suarez and Jordi Alba to support this current group. I don't think it's a quality of enough fit. And I also want to say I'm so spoiled when it comes to Inter Miami right now that I totally understand if you have a chance to bring him in, you just do it, and because he's so talented. And I get that side. And anyone who says that, you're absolutely right. I'm totally playing spoiled fan right now. But I guess the thing that really concerns me is you have Messi. There is no one like Messi. And as great as KDB is and has been, he's not Messi. And so it makes me a little nervous to not maximize what Lionel Messi is and can be while he's here. And I don't think KDB does that. And so, and that comes from someone who wasn't, I'm not a Barcelona fan. I wasn't a Messi fan until he came to Miami. Like, that doesn't come with strings attached, but I also recognize he's the guy for Inter Miami. And if you're not going to maximize that, that makes me a little uncertain of what the real plan is. You have a chance to win the MLS Cup this year, which you haven't done. And if you're going to not maximize your opportunity to do that, or compete in the Club World Cup or whatever, win the CONCACAF Champions Cup next year, if you're not maximizing your opportunity to do that,
sorry, we're never competing in the Club World Cup. I'm going to be very realistic in my expectations for that tournament. But I do concede your point that I think this is a business decision. With this what we believe is an open DP slot, or the ability to make this move, are you doing it to finish the run to win this season, or are you doing it to set up future seasons?
That's what makes me nervous.
I go back to, and call me jaded, I go back to there's a brand new stadium we're opening next year. I think it feels to me like there's a good chance this decision will be as much about 2026 as it is 2025.
Okay, let's flip it, because the other name we've heard recently is Di Maria. And it feels like the exact opposite if you bring in Angel Di Maria. 100%. He feels like the guy that fits perfectly with Messi, fits perfectly in this room, in the offense, on the field, in the culture behind the scenes. He feels like an unbelievable fit, and he still brings the talent. But he doesn't feel like he would even be here after Messi and co leave. So how do you square those two being the two names we've heard recently, if they kind of express diametrically opposed concepts of how to build this roster this summer?
So
it's weird to me.
So 2 points. I cannot get behind the Di Maria rumors because I feel so burnt by them previously.
I agree.
Like, I was so ready to buy a Di Maria jersey last year. Like, I had the order sitting in Fanatics. I'm going to buy it because I'm going to try to get it signed. Like, I was all aboard that. I think I made them multiple. It's confirmed. It's happening. And to be fair, there's been quite a few rumors. Like, I was pretty hot on Modric coming over as well. But I can't get behind that one because I'm scared. I will say the other thing is, as a fan, I think we should all be concerned what 2026 looks like if we're not making some acquisitions for the the and 26 and 27.
Okay,
because
can I stop you for a second?
All these guys are going to retire the same year.
Can I stop you for a second? Because if we have like 7 more minutes, I would love to come back to that talking point. One last question before we end the 2025 conversation. Is there anywhere else on the field besides the attacking midfielder / left winger that you think this team might look to upgrade in the summer, or are you thinking they're going to wait and see how the young players evolve and if there's any injuries that sort of force it? Because the goalkeeper feels like the one.
I'm sure there's a big board someplace in the clubhouse that they have all the guys are in. I think it's going to be more based on injuries. I think you make a great point that at left back, either we need another center back or another left back, because we don't have Noah's covering Alba, right? We've seen that when Alba goes down, Noah moves over back to left back, and then you need another center back. You have more faith in Alvarez than I do. Martinez, there doesn't seem to be a lot of faith in. So I think center back is a place where center back or left back, one of those two, we really do need it. We've seen the club get rid of Negri intentionally, so it doesn't feel like they've upgrade at left back because it feels like they're confident there. Noah's natural position is left back, and in Greece, I think he was playing left back as well, and he's trying to get in Greece as a left back. So I would think that the center back rosters where they probably would be kind of most interested on top of strikers, as discussed.
I think you make an excellent point, and I think it makes perfect sense because David Martinez, his loan ends in the summer. And if he hasn't earned himself a real role on this team, which at present he clearly hasn't, he's going to go off on loan. And then you're going to want to replace him with another body anyways. So you might as well bring in a guy that you think can play. And if he can be a backup left back or be the starting left-sided center back to allow Noah to be more of the third center back and the backup left back, like I think that makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate you bringing that up because it sort of hadn't crossed my mind, but that's an excellent point. Okay, so I think there's a potential they do something at goalkeeper. I think that makes a lot of sense at center back and potentially someone who can play left back as well. And then I think there's a big name coming because I think they want to prove to Messi that they're going to continue building this up, and not just Messi, but the MLS, Miami, this sports town, right? Okay, let's get to it. Messi, let's say 2026 is his final year. As you were saying, you're concerned.
I'm concerned because all of our major pieces are in that basket, right? When Messi goes, then Suarez goes, then Alba goes, then Busquets goes. Then all of a sudden, the young guns, Allende and them, are trying to get out of their contracts because now they're not getting visible playing time. And this is why I think you start, as soon as this summer, start building the post-Messi core, because if you wait till 2026 to do it, you're not going to have as many pieces to move around.
Do you think I have two questions in response to that. First, I'm not so sure that the young pieces are going to want to get out because I do think Inter Miami is proving, and the MLS more generally is proving, that they can send players abroad to successful careers. But I think the question I have is, do you think Javier Mascherano leaves as well? Because Inter Miami is the team that gave him his chance, but he also feels like a guy that's going to be young and ambitious. And if he can achieve a few things with Inter Miami, he's going to want to leave when a better opportunity comes. Do you think this is even something Inter Miami can do, build a culture, not a culture, a core for the post-Messi era? If you might not have the same coach, your young players are going to be ready to move on, and you're going to have to use a lot of your roster flexibility on keeping Busquets and Messi and Suarez and Alba, et cetera. So when they do all leave, is it even possible to have a core ready to replace them immediately?
So, man, you asked a lot of questions there. So I'm going to start with Mascherano. I don't see Mascherano leaving right away. I think he wants to go to Europe, right? And do you see the top five leagues, the top teams really making the bet on him right away? When by the way, working in Miami is not a bad job. It's a pretty great place to live. I could see him hanging around a little bit longer. I could also see some of these clubs going to him like, hey, you just won an MLS with Messi, like, prove you can actually do something. So I don't think he jumps right away. The only, and I'm going to say this and someone's going to flame me. If the head coaching for Argentina job all of a sudden opened up and he's proved it here with Messi, and Messi goes and gives him like his blessing, maybe that's where you could lose him to. But do you see him going out to probably La Liga is probably most likely. Like, I don't see it right away. I think, to your point of roster flexibility, it's going to be very hard to build for the future with these guys here, but you can't start from zero, so you got to start someplace.
I will just say the last coach at Barcelona before the current one, Hansi Flick, was a former Barcelona legend that won plenty with Barcelona, had huge name recognition, coached one job in a minor league, and then got the Barcelona job. Now, I understand that Xavi is a much more prominent figure in Barcelona history than Javier Mascherano, but I think those types of clubs, if they don't find an obvious player, an obvious coach right away, they will look for the next up-and-coming thing. And if you have a former player with name recognition that is having success in a lower league, I actually wouldn't be surprised at all if Javier Mascherano had calls from La Liga in a year and a half, really. That wouldn't shock me at all. Now, will he take it?
And I can see your point. I do feel like you kind of see both ways. I feel like the big clubs are trying to be more cautious about making these moves because they're tired of. I'm a Chelsea fan. How many coaches have I gone through as a Chelsea fan? Like, you keep on trying to make these moves and it doesn't work out. So you jump to the next one. Next one. You're really, what you want to do is find those proven guys. Winning, being the Argentine U21 coach and leading Messi at Inter Miami isn't going to be a huge pedigree. He's going to have to do something else first, or he's going to have to hang around here a little longer. We also haven't seen very many MLS coaches make the jump to Europe too. So you can probably make the argument maybe he actually goes someplace else, but I don't think him jumping. Like, I don't see him immediately jumping. I just keep on going back to, though, you got to start building a core ahead of time. And when you lose your 4 essentially best players, I'm sure you can make an argument if they really are the top 4. But when you lose your top 4 players in one transfer window or one summer or winter, you're screwed if you haven't started thinking about the future already. And people have made comments. I think Alex Winley is making some great comments that a lot of our young guns have contracts through 27 to help us over that pass. But you can't have all the young guns and then bring in all brand new veterans and then have the locker room issues. Like, having a veteran or 2 there that can actually hold the locker room as you bring in more is really important.
Okay, here's what I want to say. This team had for me at least, this was the most exciting time at Inter Miami was in the second half of 2022 when they brought in Pozuelo and Higuain got going for the first time, and they made a run. And they made the playoffs, and it was awesome. And that was the most fun I had. And then it was the worst time I had at the beginning of the next season when I had to watch Joseph Martinez run around like an idiot. Apologies. But it was so bad, and it was so frustrating to watch. And that's the reason I started like a Twitter and getting on here, because I needed to express my frustration because it was so bad. But it was worth it. They held the roster back so that they could go for this. So to me, if it means that at the end of 2026, Messi, Busquets, Alba, Suarez, they all leave, and then you have to spend the next 4 months really relying on young players, really relying on Santi Morales and Yannick Bright and whatever young player it fills the U22 DP spot at that point, and then you reload with the next KDB or whatever that summer. Like, to me, that's okay, because as selfish and spoiled as I am in this moment, I also understand that this is an absolute anomaly in what can happen in the MLS. So I'm worried about focusing so much on what you're talking about that we don't maximize what we have right now. That's my concern.
So they're all fair points. Mike V making a fair point that, the club is locking people into multi-year contracts, but that's only for the premium seats, by the way, Mike V, for the most part. Like, the rest of the season, the tickets are going to be on single-year contracts. MLS and Miami do not want an empty stadium 3 weeks into the 2027 season. And so you got to make sure that team can win going into 27. It has to be able to win, because otherwise, yes, your premium seats are already sold, so you already can do it. But when the rest of the stadium and the entire upper deck is empty, it doesn't look good. And so I just don't believe, and maybe this is because I'm biased, because I have a 2-year contract, so I'm stuck through 27. Like, I don't want to imagine us going through the beginning of that season again, because Phil Neville took all the blame, but the reality was we were losing because we couldn't get Messi yet. We were holding everything open for Messi.
Yes.
And it was really painful. We had the SGs revolting against the club in multiple ways, including the Fire Phil Neville banner. So, like, you got to do something to avoid that situation again, because it just turns ugly and messy, and no one wants Messi. It turns ugly and nobody wants that.
Well, it did turn into Messi, right?
It did turn into Messi, but it was very ugly, and it was very belittling to our players. The players on the field were seeing it. It just was a very nasty time, and we all know the post-Messi drop-off is going to be bad, but if you do nothing to prepare for it, it's going to be really ugly. And the good news is, the fans of mine that came to watch me rant that I haven't done this yet, if that's what the beginning of 27 looks like, it's just going to be one rant after another.
I hear what you're saying. I also think this club is better prepared to compete. You have to remember that offseason they had a poor use of their U22 spots in Emerson, and they had to move him on because he wasn't able to participate. They had the sanctions still looming over them, so they weren't able to maximize what they could even if they wanted to leave open spot for Messi and Busquets and Alba. I also think that the club's in a better spot now to build a roster without using all their DPs moving forward. But we'll see. I think it's an interesting debate, and maybe we'll come on when Messi's getting ready to retire and have that conversation. And I also want to say, like, Messi might say, I want to play again in 2027. Like, he might say that. And so again, all of this planning, it gets completely disrupted based on what Messi wants to do, right? It's hard. You're talking about KDB getting a 3-year contract. Messi might decide he wants to play all of those years. And if Messi says he wants to play, the club is going to let him play. And he's still going to be the focal point. So I just think it's hard, really hard, when you're in such a dedicated situation, which Inter Miami is in, to try and plan that far in advance without just, preparing your big board and making sure your scouts are top notch and all that stuff. But it's a very interesting conversation, and maybe it's one we'll come back to in the offseason. I remember, last question. I remember I spoke with Michelle Kaufman at the beginning of the season, and I asked her about the culture of Inter Miami. And I asked her what she thought it was becoming. And she gave me these 3 pillars that the Moss brothers and David Beckham talked about over and over and over again. But then she kept mentioning Messi's going to be a part of ownership, and he's going to have a huge role in where this club goes. And so I asked her, like, okay, but what does Messi want the culture to be? How does Messi being a part of ownership, how does that influence what this club is supposed to be, what they're trying to be, what they want to be? And she talked around that. So I guess my last question is, what is the impact of Messi becoming an owner on this team? And I get this has nothing to do with the winter transfer window, but I guess this is where we end up. What do you want this club to be after this Messi period?
It's a really interesting question. I was curious where you're going with this question. It's a really interesting question because I think there's a second unstated question of what happens to Beckham. And what I mean by that is this Messi's club? Is it Beckham's club? Or is it Bessie's club or Bexie's club? We're going to come up with a name for that one. Like, I don't think it'll be Beckham and Messi. It just doesn't feel like natural. And so I don't know. It's a great question. You kind of got me speechless, and I'm not normally known because it's like I thought this was the one you put up. There's a winning culture.
We did it, guys. We finally did it.
Yeah, you broke me because I was thinking winning culture, this and that, but it's a more in-depth question than just saying a winning culture. It's what does our coaching style look like, our playing style, who do we kind of go after? All those things play into it. And I don't know how Beckham and Messi co-own together. And I think that's a really, really interesting question because, Sean Callahan saying Messi hasn't integrated himself in South Florida at all. Here's the reverse of that. I was sitting at soccer practice day with my son who plays on Weston FC. We were talking about how many kids have met Messi because Messi's kids all play on soccer teams, and Messi seems to go to like every birthday party he can. If he's in town, he goes to these birthday parties for these kids. And so you do see them as a family integrating into South Florida. He's you see Alba going to the grocery store. I had a friend who watched Suarez fall off his bicycle one day when Suarez was out. So it does. My perspective is Messi is integrating himself into South Florida culture. I have Shooting Stars, which is an indoor soccer place right next to me. Messi's there all the time for kids' birthdays. They've got like 10 pictures of him on the wall now. So I think he's going to be happy down here. I don't see him going back to Barcelona. I see him trying to do it. But I kind of go back to this interesting question I haven't thought about of how does Beckham and Messi co-own together, and how do they kind of bring their two playing styles and they're together? Because first this was clearly Beckham's team with the Phil Neville hiring. Then now it's Messi's team with the Mascherano hiring. But right now you have to do what Messi wants because he's the guy on the field. It's my belief will become a more European team, which will be kind of a hybrid between the two. But I'm kind of not sure.
It sounds like we need to get back on the mic for another hour and a half sometime soon to talk about it. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. This was supposed to be a conversation on the winter transfer window, but I think it evolved into something just as interesting. Thank you so much for being here and dedicating almost an hour and a half of your time. I only asked for an hour, so you've been so kind with this. I really appreciate it. Please tell everyone that wants to hear more from you where they can find you and how they can hear more from you.
Absolutely. So I'm Longin. I had to think of him. I'm Mike.Longin. I'm Mike.Longin on Instagram, but I'm Longin on Twitter. Tweet all the time, mostly disagreeing with you, Scotty, lately. I can't argue with you anymore because I love your points. I'm also one of the two co-hosts of the Inter Miami show. We typically have a show every week. We've been a little off this past month just due to some family issues, between both co-hosts. And then I like to jump around. We're closely tied to Battered Herons. Love to jump on that show whenever I get a chance and talk there too. But feel free to follow me, like the Inter Miami show. And make sure if this is your first time listening to the Drive Pink Dialogue to like Scotty Grays because he's one of my favorite people to pick fights with certain other co-hosts of other shows.
Guys.
Not naming names.
Thank you so much for joining us. And again, thank you, Mike, for being a part of this. One of the things I appreciate is we come on and we talk about something and we do talk about it, but then we also talk about 3 other things that I want to expand upon. But you've been so nice and kind to join me. So thank you so much. And everyone in the chat, thank you for being a part of this. As always, you guys are my favorite part. Being able to share this with all of you and interact with you guys, I think is what makes this a next level amount of fun. Our next show will be the pregame show this weekend. So until then, I hope you have a wonderful week and enjoy time with your family, your loved ones, and do some things that you want. And hopefully Inter Miami can get a win to make this weekend special. But until then, enjoy your night. See you then. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.